Have you ever looked at a massive, like, really complex skyscraper under construction and thought about the sheer amount of coordination it takes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Right. Because you have this master blueprint and every contractor, every electrician, every welder, they're supposed to follow that exact document to the letter.
Exactly.
But imagine if, I don't know, in the dead of night, someone just slips a single altered page right into the middle of that master stack.
Well, the crews on the ground wouldn't necessarily spot the forgery. I mean, they're just reading the instructions right in front of them.
Yeah.
They'd keep building, even if those new instructions told them to, like, put a load-bearing wall right in the middle of a hallway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And from the outside, the building might look like it's going up perfectly,
Right.
but the internal structural integrity is completely compromised. So, welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are looking at a highly controversial, highly specific set of claims laid out in a YouTube video transcript from Dr. John Campbell's channel.
Yeah, it's an interview titled, "All mRNA Vaccines Risky."
Right. And before we go a single step further, we really need to establish the ground rules for the terrain we are navigating today, because the source material we are examining contains highly charged medical, scientific, and political viewpoints.
Extremely charged, and we want to state explicitly right at the top that we are entirely impartial here.
100%.
We are not taking sides. Like, we aren't leaning left-wing, we aren't leaning right-wing, and we are absolutely not endorsing, validating, or, verifying the medical claims made in this video.
Right. Our sole job today is to act as neutral guides for you. We are unpacking the exact ideas and arguments contained in this specific transcript so you can understand the mechanics of what the guest is claiming.
Exactly. We are mapping the architecture of their argument, looking at how they build their case from microscopic biology all the way up to global politics.
Okay, let's unpack this. The central premise the guest asserts is that mRNA vaccines are causing severe systemic health crises ranging from aggressive cancers to autoimmune diseases and, like, serious heart conditions.
Right.
But to grasp how they reach that massive conclusion, we have to start at the cellular level.
Yeah.
So, according to the video, how is this rogue blueprint actually operating inside the body?
Well, the foundation of the argument rests on a complete rejection of the traditional narrative around mRNA.
Okay.
Because the standard public health explanation is that mRNA enters the cell, delivers a temporary instruction to manufacture a spike protein, and then rapidly degrades.
Like a self-destructing message.
Exactly. But the guest in this transcript argues the exact opposite. They claim the messenger RNA is actually inserting itself directly into human DNA.
Which is that's a massive biological claim.
Yeah.
Because basic high school biology teaches the central dogma, right? DNA makes RNA, which makes protein.
Right, the flow of information.
Yeah, it doesn't naturally go backward from RNA into DNA without specialized enzymes like reverse transcriptase, which viruses like HIV use.
Yep.
So does the source explain the mechanical how of this insertion?
They don't really, well, the transcript focuses less on the precise enzymatic mechanism and heavily on claimed observational data.
Okay.
The guest cites literature allegedly finding this genetic material in the body like 700 days later.
Wow, 700 days?
Yeah, and they also point to a medical meeting in Boston where they claim it was identified 3.5 years after the fact.
3.5 years.
Right. So from their perspective, the sheer persistence of the material proves it has integrated into the genome.
And they argue this insertion is entirely random, right? It's just throwing darts at the human genome.
Exactly.
Which leads directly to their claims about cancer. But there's nuance here that we should clarify. The guest isn't necessarily saying the mRNA creates a brand new cancer completely out of thin air.
Right. The narrative presented is that it acts as an extreme accelerant. If you have dormant cancer cells or a tumor your body was successfully managing, the guest claims this genetic disruption just throws gasoline on it.
Jeez.
They cite marked activation of inflammation and microclotting as part of this field. But the deeper mechanical argument involves a molecular expert they reference, Dr. Wafik El-Diri.
Right, and this is where that rogue blueprint analogy really comes to life for me.
Yeah.
Because tumor suppressor genes are basically the body's antivirus software.
That's a good way to put it.
They are the genes responsible for hitting the brakes when a cell starts mutating or dividing out of control.
Exactly. And Dr. El-Diri's theory, as summarized by the guest, is that the inserted spike protein sequence doesn't even need to physically bind to those tumor suppressor genes to shut them down.
Wait, really? It doesn't even have to bind?
No, they claim mere proximity is enough.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if this random genetic insertion happens to land anywhere near the tumor suppressor gene, it can create a localized interference pattern. It basically blocks the signaling pathway that normally suppresses oncogenic or, cancer-causing events.
Okay, is this like randomly dropping a line of rogue code into a complex software program? If it just happens to land right next to the antivirus software, the tumor suppressor genes, it just shuts down the body's defenses.
Yeah, that's exactly the claim. But what's fascinating here is that the transcript outlines a dual mechanism. Cutting the brakes is only half the problem, according to the guest.
Right.
The other half is happening simultaneously at the cellular level. The guest claims there is a profound suppression of T cells.
Okay, and T cells are the specialized assassins of your immune system. They patrol the bloodstream, specifically looking for mutated cancerous cells to destroy.
Right. So if the tumor suppressor genes are the brakes, the T cells are the police actively pulling over the runaway cars.
And the source is claiming both are being disabled at the exact same time.
Exactly. The video's narrative is that this specific combination, genetic interference plus disarmed T cells, results in a phenomenon they term hyperprogressive or turbo cancer.
Turbo cancer.
Yeah. The guest describes dormant cancers aggressively coming out of remission.
And they highlight a surge in incredibly rare cancers too, right?
They do.
Like the source mentions acute myeloid leukemia, cancers of the endocrine system, and tumors in the parotid or salivary glands. The guest points out that a typical working oncologist might rarely, if ever, see some of these in patients of a certain age, yet they are allegedly flooding clinics.
Right. And when reviewing Japanese data, the guest claims they were horrified because the cancers observed weren't just the types typically kept in check by T cells.
Okay.
They were spanning the entire spectrum: breast, prostate, pancreas, lymphoma. To the guest, this widespread variety is the smoking gun that random genetic insertion is the underlying culprit.
Okay, so if this rogue code is now in the DNA, permanently churning out these spike proteins, the body isn't just going to sit there and watch. I mean, the immune system has to react to this flood of foreign material,
Right.
which bridges us to the guest's claims about the immune system essentially turning on itself.
Yeah. And to set this up, the guest pulls from historical research. They discuss working with a biophysicist named Birger Sorensen for over 2 decades, specifically looking at HIV vaccines.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the guest claims they tried to warn major figures like Dr. Anthony Fauci and the Gates Foundation about a fundamental flaw in vaccine design.
Which was?
That you should never use a whole virus envelope because there are simply too many antigens.
Okay, antigens being the molecular name tags that trigger the body's immune alarms.
Precisely. They argue that historically, those whole envelope HIV vaccines were catastrophic failures because they introduced too many confusing signals, allegedly causing more infection than the placebo.
Wow.
And they are taking that historical premise and applying it directly to the mRNA spike protein design.
Right. And they evaluate this using something called a blast analysis. The source actually likens this to playing the card game Snap with a supercomputer.
Right, playing Snap.
Like, you take the molecular sequence of the spike protein, feed it into a database of known human sequences, and wait for the computer to yell snap when it finds a match.
Yeah, and the results they claim from this matching game are the crux of their autoimmunity argument. They state that 79%, which they casually round up to 80% of the spike protein, is homologous to known human epitopes.
Let's break down epitopes for a second for everyone. An epitope is the specific little ridge or bump on an antigen that a circulating antibody physically locks onto,
Yeah.
right? Like a key fitting into a lock.
Exactly. And the guest is arguing that 80% of the locks on this foreign spike protein look practically identical to the normal healthy molecules found in your pancreas, your brain, or your kidneys.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. And I think we need to look closely at the language the guest uses.
Okay.
Because they claim that if you fed this homology data to an AI, the computer would flag it and say, do not use this because autoimmunity is guaranteed. Like, that's the word they use, guaranteed.
Yes, they do.
How does the source mechanically justify jumping from a computer matching game to an absolute 100% guarantee of systemic autoimmune disease?
Well, the mechanical justification relies on a concept called cross-reactivity.
Okay.
When a foreign protein is 80% identical to your own tissue, the guest argues the immune system fundamentally loses the ability to distinguish friend from foe.
Because they just look too similar.
Right. When your body manufactures antibodies to hunt down the spike protein, those same antibodies will inevitably bump into a kidney cell, see a matching epitope, and attack the kidney.
Ah, friendly fire.
In their view, it's a biological certainty, hence the word guaranteed, because the structural similarity is just too high to avoid that friendly fire.
And they bolster this by pointing to the VIER's website, right? The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System.
They do, yeah.
The guest claims there are 131 different autoimmune diseases listed as side effects. They extrapolate that data, suggesting that a sixth or a seventh of the entire population might be affected in some capacity.
And the knock-on effect of this, according to the transcript, is a catastrophic logistical and financial burden on health services. They give a specific nod to the NHS and the UK.
Right.
The guest describes knowing people hospitalized for months, requiring highly sophisticated interventions like weekly anti-TNF drugs.
Now, anti-TNF drugs are no joke. TNF stands for tumor necrosis factor, which is a major signaling protein that drives inflammation. If you are on an anti-TNF drug, your immune system is so hyperactive that doctors have to artificially suppress it just to stop it from destroying your own organs.
Exactly.
Which, also leaves you incredibly vulnerable to other infections. And these treatments cost a fortune.
Which is exactly the guest's point. They are painting a picture of a healthcare system buckling under the weight of guaranteed system-wide autoimmune reactions.
So the narrative gives us systemic genetic interference and systemic autoimmune attacks. But the source zeroes in on one specific organ to make the real-world impact visceral. And that's the heart.
Right. The discussion of cardiovascular complications is where the transcript reaches its most intense critique of the medical establishment.
Yeah, it gets pretty heated.
The guest has a visceral reaction to the medical community using the word mild to describe vaccine-induced myocarditis.
The quotes from the video are incredibly dark. The guest completely rejects the premise that heart inflammation can ever be brushed off. They say, mild myocarditis is like mild pregnancy or mild death. Mild forgetting your parachute when you fall out of an airplane.
It's a strong visual. And physiologically, they argue the damage is structural, permanent, and easily verifiable. The source claims MRIs are identifying severe issues months after the fact.
Okay.
The specific mechanism they point to is the creation of ectopic electrical foci in the myocardium, the muscular wall of the heart.
Okay, let's break that down. If the heart is a precisely tuned engine, an ectopic electrical focus is basically a rogue spark plug misfiring.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Because the heart relies on a very specific synchronized electrical wave to beat efficiently. If you have abnormal clusters of cells generating their own random electrical impulses, it completely disrupts that wave.
And that disruption is what makes conditions like atrial fibrillation or ventricular fibrillation so much more likely. The guest argues this becomes acutely dangerous when the body is challenged by external stressors.
They list stressors like illness, toxins, hypoxia, which is when tissues are starved for oxygen, or even just normal physical exertion.
Right.
The guest actually shares a story about people in their own village reporting unbelievable exertional tachycardia, where their heart rate dangerously skyrockets just from moving around, a condition the guest attributes entirely to the vaccine.
And there is a fascinating psychological paradox highlighted right after this in the source.
Oh, the patient's thanking them.
Yes. The guest describes interactions with patients who have suffered these severe cardiac events. And instead of being angry, these patients actually thank the vaccine.
It's wild to think about.
They have rationalized that without it, whatever underlying illness triggered the heart issue would have outright killed them.
And the guest mentions a colleague saying exactly that to their face, expressing profound bewilderment at the mental gymnastics involved.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this patient reaction acts as the hinge for the entire transcript.
How so?
Well, it allows the guest to transition from microscopic biology and cardiology into a massive argument about mass conditioning and institutional groupthink.
Right, because it's the natural question you, as a listener, would have at this point in the video.
Yeah.
If the cellular damage, the turbo cancers, and the permanent heart issues are as blatant, severe, and measurable as the guest claims, why isn't the global medical community screaming from the rooftops?
Exactly.
And the source's answer is systemic denial and a top-down institutional cover-up.
Yeah, the guest aims their disbelief at major medical institutions. For instance, they call out the head of ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology.
And ASCO represents roughly 50,000 doctors.
Right. The head of ASCO allegedly stated they are not seeing the supposed rise in cancers.
And the guest's counter-argument.
It's blunt. They say they aren't seeing it because they are actively refusing to look.
Wow. They also take aim at specific officials, right? Like mocking a Dr. Julie Garreau or Gerberding, claiming her replies to questioning were preposterous and lacked basic Schoolgirl biology.
Yes. And they bring up a U.S. Senate hearing with Ron Johnson, painting this really striking visual of a senator having to drag a physical flip chart into a room just to force health officials to look at cancer data they were otherwise ignoring.
And the transcript turns its fire on regulatory bodies as well, specifically the MHRA in the UK.
Yeah.
The guest alleges the agency ignored thousands of warnings.
Yeah, they specifically mentioned 48,000 yellow cards and red cards for the AstraZeneca vaccine alone.
48,000.
That's the claim.
And they draw a very sharp historical comparison to thalidomide. For context for you listening, thalidomide was a drug in the 1950s and 60s that was quickly pulled from the market after it was linked to severe birth defects.
Right.
The guest is demanding to know why the current situation hasn't triggered an immediate halt in the exact same way.
And the conspiracy deepens at the clinical level, too. The guest claims they have private conversations with oncologists who freely admit that boosters are causing lymphomas, but these same doctors are supposedly too terrified for their careers to speak out publicly.
Okay, let's apply some critical friction here. To buy into this part of the source's narrative, a listener has to accept a logistical scale that is almost unfathomable.
It's massive.
We are talking about silencing or coordinating 50,000 independent oncologists, local GPs, global health regulators, and chief medical officers. How does the guest explain the motive behind a cover-up of this magnitude?
Well, the guest explicitly compares the current climate to George Orwell's dystopian novel, 1984, calling it uncannily prophetic. They argue that the establishment is punishing truth-tellers while protecting the narrative.
And they draw a highly political parallel to recent events in the UK, specifically citing the Southport riots.
Yes.
The guest alleges the government released known violent criminals, murderers and rapists, to make room in prisons for citizens who merely had naughty thoughts or wrong thoughts about the establishment narrative.
Right. The guest concludes there is zero medical or scientific rationale left for defending the vaccines. So they hypothesize darker motives.
Like what?
They cynically ask if the intention is a deliberate plan to reduce the pension bill by letting people die, or at the very best, a case of bizarre, negligent groupthink orchestrated by a modern-day Ministry of Truth.
So what does this all mean? We've covered an immense amount of ground today, and the shift in tone within the source material is jarring, to say the least.
Yeah, it really is.
We started by debating the microscopic mechanics of reverse transcription in epitopes, and we ended up discussing global population control theories and prison riots.
But the architecture of the guest's argument relies on the biological claims to justify the sociopolitical ones. They frame the global medical establishment not merely as slow, bureaucratic, or mistaken, but as actively and maliciously hostile to empirical reality.
Let's recap the journey of this deep dive. We started with the guest's core assertion that mRNA bypasses traditional biology, inserting into human DNA, shutting down tumor suppressors, and disarming T cells to fuel turbocancers.
Right, and then we examine the blast analysis, where the guest argues that an 80% molecular homology with human tissue creates a biological guarantee of autoimmune diseases, basically turning the body into a battleground of cross-reactivity.
Then we look at the structural claims regarding the heart, exploring the metaphor of ectopic electrical foci as misfiring spark plugs, and the guest's fierce rejection of the term mild myocarditis.
And finally, we analyze the leap to sociopolitical claims, terrified oncologists, ignored flip charts, and allegations of an Orwellian cover-up driven by a desire to reduce pension burdens.
As we wrap up, I want to give one final reminder to you, our listener. Our mission today was purely analytical.
Totally impartial.
We set out to map the specific claims and the underlying logic presented in this Dr. John Campbell interview transcript. We are conveying how the guest connects their biological theories to their political conclusions.
Right.
We're not validating the science, nor are we adopting the political stances discussed. Our goal is simply to ensure you are fully informed about what is being argued in the material.
And this raises an important question, one that extends far beyond the realm of virology and touches on how we function as a society in the information age.
Yeah.
When a dissenting voice claims to possess clinical data that directly contradicts the overwhelming consensus of global health institutions, how do we effectively investigate those outlier claims? How do we evaluate this kind of information without falling into absolute unquestioning groupthink on one side or unchecked sprawling conspiracy on the other?
It brings us right back to that skyscraper. If a contractor whispers that the master blueprint is fatally flawed, you don't just blindly keep pouring concrete, but you also don't immediately dynamite the foundation. You have to stop, pull out the magnifying glass, and rigorously examine every single line of code for yourself.
Exactly.
Something to think about the next time you are handed a new set of instructions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.